What's the worst HR is not your friend story you've witnessed experienced? HR ordered me to downgrade my 3 excellent employee reviews to satisfactory because management didn't recognize their names. I got written up for telling my employees this. HR denied that they told me anything, even though I had the emails from them documenting it. Totally worth it. My employees were excellent and got the raises they deserved. I saw a similar situation. The company has a policy where 10% of the workers had to get bad performance reviews, which meant no raise that year. What the company didn't take into account is that some teams are small and hyper specialized. You can imagine what happened next. A bunch of crucial employees quit and that policy was cancelled. But the damage was done. I fight this every year. Their argument is that part of the job should be going above and beyond the call of duty, so when people do a good job that's technically satisfactory work which warrants the same merit increase as everybody else. When I ask what the metrics are for exemplary work, they straight up told me that executive leadership isn't allowing any exemplary ratings this year and that generally nobody should be able to get an exemplary rating. My counter is that hard work should be rewarded to encourage further hard work, and ask if they want to send a message that the company is only willing to encourage the bare minimum. Yes, that's what we'd prefer. The 3-point scale should just be a 2-point scale. Nobody should get a 3. Ain't that some holy sh. This brings back an awful memory. We introduced a new performance-based bonus system, where if you exceeded expectations on the goals set in the year you got a good percentage bonus. So everyone worked really hard in my department. Things got done above and beyond. I slaved 45+ hours a week, came in overnight, all that jazz. We had a huge meeting where HR then said that because everyone worked so hard, every employee in the department was being downgraded from the highest or second highest level to just okay. We were fuming, but it turns out the people who didn't get rejudged were the management. I quit about 6 months later. A kind of similar thing happened to me at my old job. Our entire department get tested based on our skills level. Turns out, more than half of us were suited for higher categories, meaning we were getting underpaid. I was not a junior but a semi-senior. For example, suddenly the test doesn't matter and HR basically forgets about it. But now you have a bunch of employees that know they are being played. Everyone left eventually. So with a performance review cycle 1 year, my manager at the time opened with just so everyone is aware before I start performance reviews. Our third line manager and up want me to put needs improvement for at least one field for everyone. I don't personally agree with that, so don't take it personally. This was in a private department Slack channel so that all my co-workers could see, but our replies aren't in the channel. When he actually got around to the individual performance reviews and got to me, he started with, firstly, I've been advised to retract my statement about the mandatory needs improvement. Before going into the review, I figured someone ratted him out. I'm really wondering who the rat was. Personally, I'd rather honesty about things like that, but I can see why HR and upline managers wouldn't. I worked at a smallish company that grew big enough to hire a HR person. Her office was down from mine, so in the mornings I'd swing by and say hi. That turned into grabbing a cup of coffee she had just made, into having a pastry and talking about life. I found that if I mentioned someone's name in passing, a few minutes later she would spill the beans about that person's life. What work issues they had, health issues, family issues, etc. I learned really quick any issues I had not to take them to her. She made it like 6 months before she got fired. Holy snacks, literally figuratively Pam from Archer lol. I went to HR to report that my team's manager was illegally shorting all of our paychecks. HR's response was to adopt a new company-wide policy addressing the paycheck issue and back paying most people for a certain amount, and also to frame me for work avoidance. HR undid disabled part of my login account to a tool we used, and then fired me a few months later after failing to fix the problem and allowing me to actually do my job. They tried to deny my unemployment claim afterward. Told the unemployment rep that they had logs showing that I did something to break the tool I don't even have access to break in the first place. They also didn't think to disable my email access in a timely manner, so I was able to back up all my emails with it documenting exactly what went down. Unemployment approved my claim and hit them with a major penalty to their insurance. I love it when justice is served. HR hired consultants to run morale building employee input sessions. basically saying we're not from the company. You can tell us all the things you don't like about working here and would like to see changed and we'll put it all into a report for management. Don't worry, everything is anonymous. We just need material for our report and you guys get to have your say in improving things around here. Turns out HR and the consultants recorded all the sessions and played the highlights for management. People were disciplined for criticizing the company or their immediate superiors, and any shred of faith or trust in management that the employees may have had was instantly incinerated. Managers now complain that they don't know what's going on in their teams because nobody tells them anything. I wonder why. Reminds me my last company. HR sent out an anonymous survey in doc file by email and we should have replied back with filled blanks. We figured out it's not really anonymous as who sent it would literally be written in from. So we filled the forms on the same machine and sent all them in single email. And HR was like, wait, you can't do that. By anonymous I meant I will not tell boss and just aggregate data for them. Can't say it inspired lots of trust. I noticed an anonymous survey wasn't anonymous when HR emailed all the people who had yet to take it. I was like, how do they know who didn't take it and thus refused to do it? My former employer sent me to employer-funded therapy and then used the therapist's notes to place me on indefinite stress leave because, as they put it, employee exhibits negative views of workplace. I was a prison guard. Of course I didn't like being there. That doesn't mean I'm incapable of handling it. My company just rolled out company-funded therapy and counseling. No one trusts it. Wouldn't something like therapy be impossible to report on? I'm sure there are some privacy and HIPAA regulations in place somewhere. Everything is anonymous. Oh hell no. I worked for Sue and they gave us one of these workplace climate surveys once and I noticed the URL was personalized for each person. Yes, I'll definitely be honest on this one when you know who it is. Overall I've been able to get along with HR departments with one exception. I was working a help desk job for a company during college and the head of HR called in for help. He was making an Excel spreadsheet and couldn't figure out how to make a formula do what he wanted. I offered to come take a look as we were in the same building and he told me I couldn't because the spreadsheet was full of confidential information. So I asked then if he could describe what exactly he was trying to do without giving away any specific info, and he told me that what he was trying to do was confidential. So I clarified that he wanted me to tell him how to do something but I couldn't see it and he wouldn't even tell me what it was he was trying to do. At that point he agreed that I wouldn't be able to assist him since he couldn't divulge anything. As soon as we hung up he called my boss to complain that I was useless, that there is a top tier class A moron. You have my sympathy. They already said it was the head of HR. Calling him a class A moron is redundant. Sounds like it in a nutshell. Everything's fine. You don't do anything. So why are we paying you? Something breaks. This wouldn't have happened if you'd done your job. Why are we paying you? Car drives into garage for repairs. Hey, there's a problem with my car. Okay, well you've come to the right place. What's the problem? I'm not telling you. Why? I can't tell you that either. Get the F out my garage. I asked my boss for a desk phone with a speakerphone function because sometimes I need it at work to conference people on the phone with people in my office. We had these old, yellow phones. So he told me to make a request to him and CC our office manager, and he'd send it to the HR department of our region via email. So I put forth a nice email outlining what I am requesting, and why I need it for HR's request. My office manager replies all and asks HR Palazarus 870 request. Should I order the phone through the same channels I have used before or is there a new policy? HR responded livid. She demanded to know why I needed this phone. It was in the email. And then accused my office manager of going behind HR's back in ordering phones before without approval. My office manager told my boss, who called HR and chewed her out and I could hear yelling. My boss came out of his office and yelled at me. See what you've caused. He was fired up but I know he didn't mean anything malicious by it. I just laughed. HR had to apologize to office manager for accusations. Turns out, after everybody yelled their effing lungs out for an hour, the speakerphone I needed was literally free and we had boxes of them in storage. I had it for a month before HR rolled out new fancy phones that were actually expensive and convoluted. requiring training to set up and use. At the company picnic we had to wear fine name tags and I had never met HR lady face to face and she came up and said, "Oh, we haven't met. What's your name?" And I was trying to hide my name tag but she read it and didn't seem happy to see me. Why does HR have anything to do with equipment? It's human resources, not equipment resources. HR person used her position to collect intel to get people she didn't like fired. That's standard practice for all HR. Firing people they don't like is the only way they get to stroke their power trip when things are otherwise going well in the company. The HR payroll manager at a small hospital I worked at had a bad habit of not paying out the sign-on bonus that was paid out incrementally in 3 payments through the course of a year, and sign-on bonuses for picking up extra shifts. After repeated requests to be belatedly compensated, I took it to corporate to address my issue immediately. A couple weeks later I was terminated on what amounted to a technicality where I forget my badge one shift and my relief was late to take over sitting with a patient, causing me to receive more points against me than if I had called out for that shift. When I was called in to receive my notification, the director of nursing was shocked but ultimately not much she could do. Pulled into a meeting with 2 HR reps in the middle of my shift. Taken to this really nice boardroom, which was confusing because I was just a grunt and this is literally floors above where I should ever be. They sat me down and said basically, "What do you have to say for yourself?" Me, still confused, tells them I have no idea what they are talking about. Everyone is really quiet and serious and I'm scared shitless. And they say, "You know what you did. This is cause for termination. Blah blah." I'm literally thinking this is really excessive for being a few minutes late sometimes. I insist I don't know what's going on. One of them maybe realized something was wrong and flips open a file and says, "You're XX, right?" Turns out they got me mixed up with someone else who has the same name. On the elevator ride down by myself I was still sweating. Don't know what that other person did but man, HR does not play. This happened at one place I worked at. They pulled the wrong sister into a meeting and started chewing her out for far too long before they realized they had the wrong person in there. I don't think apologies were ever made. Office survey. I put in some honest opinions of a member of my team. They were fair and honest criticisms of a system which was not working as designed. I had little contact with the system, but the whole thing seemed reasonable to me. I was, in effect, demoted for this. A position was created above me and a colleague who was my equal was to be my manager. Position did not exist before. This happened the same week my husband died and the management felt like sh because of the timing. But still, on my return to work, I was basically called out for criticizing the same system in a whole company meeting, and it was explained how X system should and did work and anyone who thought it didn't work was stupid. Cut to 2 years later, person above me quits. Partly because they're scared to tell company that anything's gone wrong because of how I was treated, and they have to promote me to that position because it now exists according to the rules and I'm the only one who can do it. Again, in a whole company meeting, they admit X system isn't working and we're having a consultation to find out why. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I had to leave the room before it turned into hysteria. At my last real job before striking out on my own, I had an exit interview with the HR lady, who was actually just someone who was friends with the company president who was filling in because the actual HR lady with a degree in HR and everything quit. A lot of people at this place quit. It was a terrible place to work with out of touch management and illusions of grandeur limping along building websites for a business niche that was mostly old people who thought the internet was magic. During the exit interview she asked why I was leaving. I told her I liked my co-workers a lot, but hated the company. She got this exasperated look and got genuinely upset and told me that she'd been getting that same line from everybody else who quit and had their exit interview recently. It boggled my mind that they could hear the same thing over and over again from so many people putting in their time until they could go on to something better and not stop to think they should change something. It boggled my mind that they could hear the same thing over and over again from so many people putting in their time until they could go on to something better and not stop to think they should change something. It's not a defect, it's a feature. A lot of businesses don't need the best and brightest when the fairly competent and cheapest will do, as long as there's fresh meat in the job pool. What you're describing is just a great way to keep costs down. Every second Friday of the month people in my office would get drinks after work. One time it happened to fall on my birthday. Because they let me pick the bar, I figured I would just invite some friends there too to meet up with me after. Usually these drinks lasted from like 4-5:30 with my coworkers. Well, one coworker, who was generally a bit odd, stayed and sort of stuck to me and my friends. I didn't really want her there, but she couldn't take a hint and I was 3 cocktails in. So I just gave up and didn't say anything. One of my friends starts talking about sex. Nothing particularly vulgar or kinky, or even about our personal lives. It was mainly just about the politics of sex and relationships. The following Tuesday I got an email from HR about having inappropriate conversations of a sexual nature with coworkers. I tried to explain what happened, and even though I think the person believed me, and other workers corroborated my story, I was written up for sexual misconduct. I obviously did not want that on my record, so I escalated it all the way up the company. And eventually, we had a 4-hour meeting with a regional HR person where my coworker just cried and caved. Then afterwards she had a bunch of people in trouble for a toxic work environment because nobody wanted to be around her and she was never invited to any social events. It was the dumbest effing thing I've ever experienced. What a clusterf. Saying clusterf is inappropriate sexual conduct. I've scheduled a meeting between you and HR at 11. Upon giving 2 weeks notice, I get this stupid rant about millennial snowflakes. How we can't take the stress of a real job, and how we think we're so important and unique. But in reality the only thing that would happen is that they would find another engineer to fill in for me, and things would be like I never existed. After the initial shock, I replied, whether you are absolutely correct, me staying or not is meaningless. Consider my resignation immediate from this moment. Please give me the paperwork to sign. If I had $1 for every boomer that called me a millennial snowflake, I'd be able to buy a house in the market they destroyed. I don't understand how these people exist. I've had bosses and clients insult me at work a tiny handful of times. If you think I'm worthless, stop giving me money and you'll never see me again. Problem solved. If you need my services, don't be a refhead. I love you. I reported sexual harassment to HR at a large international company when I was 21. They notified my harasser, an older VP, before I even made it back to my desk. I was fired a few days later, despite an excellent performance review the week before he propositioned me. Not HR, but heed my warning. Don't type anything into your work computer that you wouldn't say directly to your company's HR person's face. I have seen people had cases built against them for poor work and ultimately fired for the they say over Skype. After 4 years on the job, I was given a first and final warning for asking why the hell HR was behind a locked door and now dominated over half the first floor, filled with new furniture that was unused after 6 months. Meanwhile, my chair was taken by another employee and I was told to use the chair without padding. An executive from another department heard my complaint, stole one of the unused chairs from the HR expansion, and gave it to me, explaining that if I did it, I'd be fired. She did it, daring them to fire her. Pick 1. The HR director who put not 1, not 2, but 3 people on the job of auditing everyone's FMLA applications. We were to look up the medical terms, print out layperson friendly summaries of them, add any notes of our own that might be helpful if we had prior healthcare experience. Also, she could make sure no one was fraudulently taking medical leave. For anyone who may not be aware, the Family Medical Leave Act in the US gives employees the right to take up to 12 weeks of leave from their job, unpaid. And while it isn't a HIPAA violation by the letter of the law, it certainly is in spirit. None of this information was any of this BS business, and none of the employees had any idea she was doing it. The HR guy who helped tabulate the test results for the customer service employees and admitted that even though the passing score was, let's say, a 70%, he loved the company so much that he had taken it upon himself to only pass people scoring above 95% up the chain. Might sound reasonable, until you factor in that these were personality tests designed to detect how subservient you were to others. The workers' comp lady who refused to train anyone on how to provide pay information to the feds in order to get benefits flowing, and who had accrued enough PTO to be out 5 and 6 weeks at a stretch, leaving injured employees to twist in the wind. I only spent a couple of years in HR. It was a couple of years too many. I will sweep streets and clean sewers before I will ever work with such psychopathic CS again. when I complained to a coworker about a minor dental insurance issue and HR contacted me about it within an hour. Now I know I can trust neither of you. Not the type of answer you were looking for, but when the stupid, effing, self-absorbed, ahead effing what HR person replied to spam email allegedly from the boss and sent all the info for all 400 employees. Everything on your job application sent to scammers. Thanks, Kathy, you stupid C. Worked in HR for a time, and it soured my view of HR more than any stories I'd heard. One incident that stands out in my memory was a young casual worker who accused her boss of sexual harassment. I dutifully brought it up the chain, but the higher-ups did not care if the boss had done anything or not. The cost of not giving her any more hours was zero, so that's what they did. That's just one case that I dealt with, but you'd see it on a daily basis. There were literally pop-up notifications on the phone calls and emails from people deemed too high up to refuse. You're a part-time employee who's done everything right, hasn't been paid in 2 months, and can't make rent? Oh, shout a luck. Nothing we can do. Meanwhile, their boss who forgot to put in a timesheet? Of course sir. Expedited payment sir. Will be in your account by close of business sir. HR is there, protect the business. You want protection? Join a union. I worked in HR and here's my advice. Never, ever willingly give up any information on phishing questions. Make sure your answers are brief, succinct, and don't elaborate unless absolutely necessary. Don't give second-hand information unless it directly impacts you or your work environment. My goal was to protect the bottom line under the guise of employee relations. If you become a headache and disruptive, regardless if you are in the right, we will find a way to terminate your employment. I spent hours upon hours in training learning how to ask the right questions to get the company's desired results. I will admit this may not be true for all HR departments, but for larger companies we are not your friend, and our attitude and pseudo-compassion is used as a disarming tactic to obtain the information we're looking for. Despite what you may be told, we do have an agenda. When I started my job, the person that was training me was telling me that a lead in a different department had been sexually harassing her, and she finally told HR about it. HR pulled their chat logs, and since she had called him a dick for calling her a hooker, she also got written up.